Hi everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Eric. Today I'm going to talk about the 1988 film They Live, directed by John Carpenter, starring Roddy Piper. So this film is an adaptation of a short story, which I'd never read before, but I did read it before I watched it this time. Short story called 8 O'Clock in the Morning by Ray Nelson. And the story is really short. Like, you can read it in... It's only 5 or 6 pages, so it doesn't take long to read. And the short story is kind of like... The movie took one big scene from the story, where in the story, the character is hypnotized, and he starts seeing, like, these lizard, reptilian people all around him, and realizes that there's some sort of alien invasion type thing going on. The story takes a few odd turns, but that was the genesis for this John Carpenter film that came out in 1988, and just a little bit on the film. So it stars Roddy Piper. He was a huge star in professional wrestling at the time. Like, I grew up watching wrestling. You knew who Roddy Piper was. And for what Carpenter, there's a long quote. Carpenter talked about why he cast Piper, because he wanted some authenticity. He wanted someone on the screen who looked like they'd lived a life and that they had, been through a lot. And Piper had been through a lot with the rough and tumble wrestling world. And, like you could see on his face, right, that this person has been lived a hard life. So that was one of the big reasons why Piper was cast in the film. But he also had, being in professional wrestling, he also had a good sense of theatricality. He knew timing. He knew how to deliver lines. So really a smart move by Carpenter. You would think he would go with like Kurt Russell or someone like that he'd worked with a lot, or another star at the time. I don't know, Bruce Willis or someone like that. But Piper was inspired casting, no doubt. And also Keith David is in here. Another, he'd been on the Carpenter film The Thing, and so those are the two main characters in here. And a few people like in Carpenter's company also appear. Peter Jason. As well, and some others. Meg Foster also. This might have been her only Carpenter film, but that's a little bit on the cast. The story, we follow Nada, the Roddy Piper character, who is out of work, and he had to move to a different town to find work, and he works construction, and he's finding not much opportunity. He finally gets a job with working construction, though, and finds conditions in the city have lessened. He kind of becomes friends with Keith David, another worker there, and they talk about how work has dried up and how the American dream doesn't appear to be reachable anymore. And Piper has this speech that's almost like something from a John Steinbeck novel that Carpenter wrote about the state of America, and I'll talk more about that as we get into the late Reagan era. But I think it's worth reading that speech a little bit. So Piper said, "I deliver a hard day's work for my money. I just want the chance. It'll come. I believe in America. I follow the rules. Everybody's got their own hard times these days." So he starts out the film, even though he's going through hard times, he still believes. He's still a believer in the promise. And actually, I think the first third of the film is the best part of it, where we're kind of in this shanty town where unhoused people are living, and there's a TV set going, and we get pirate signals from this TV set where there's some dude on the TV screen talking about, conspiracies and corporations and all this type of thing, right? pirate TV, like that kind of goes back to Videodrome. Kind of dealt with that a little bit with pirate TV stations, and but eventually the city moves in. This was filmed in L.A., and the cops basically destroy the shanty town and drive everyone out. Clearing the space of these people. So the first third of the film does, like I said, does a really good job of showing like the plight of people in the underclass. And then we get to the more sci-fi aspect where I'm not discover some glasses, of course. Everyone knows this. Like this movie has attracted a lot of commentary. There's been books, studies written on this film. But he finds these glasses, and then he looks through the glasses, and he starts to discover like lizard people, and clearly like some sort of alien invasion happening. So we're very much like a 50s type of situation, and plus all the subliminal messages on the billboards. Make money, reproduce, consume. So, and Carpenter has said this such. Like we're getting into late '80s, late Reagan era, where this is like Gordon Gekko, greed is good decade, and working people. There's deindustrialization happening with factories closing, and the working class is really hit hard throughout the 1980s, and the film does a really good job of channeling all that, but also how culture had changed, I think, since through the 1980s, where the capitalist ethos is so ingrained in America. Like there's really hardly any room for anyone who challenges that, or if anyone did challenge it, they would face consequences usually. So this is just a great example of a genre film offering some sharp social commentary. And like I said, there's been monographs and books written about this, and Carpenter himself has spoken out about this. So he sees all these. There is this big conspiracy, by the way, and he's kind of becomes like a one-man army. Like he starts trying to take everyone out, and famously, there's the fight scene with Keith David and Piper, where he's trying to get his friend to look through the glasses, and he refuses to do it. And I know there's been analysis because the fight scene goes on much longer than typical fight scenes, and interpretations of that. I forget who. I'm not citing somebody, but the point was made, like that scene is all about the internal struggle of finding the truth, okay, and how sometimes when we've been programmed to see the world one way, and then when we start to see some strong evidence to the contrary, like the internal struggle. So that really unique fight that they have, which is like kind of a fist fight, kind of professional wrestling, so that goes on too. And then the last section of the film, I think, is maybe the weakest. It becomes more guys with guns action movie, as we learn about basically there's like a colonialization project happening, and we get the full breadth of the conspiracy by the end of the film. But it does have a lot of Carpenter's cynical humor throughout that final section, so it generally works. But like I said, the short story kind of ends on a hopeless note too, and this film similar, although there's a little bit more humor, dark humor at the end of They Live. So yeah, I mean, this movie, I think it's left a legacy. I think when it came out, I think the critical establishment, who never liked Carpenter films much anyway, but it would really be the next generation who would come in and really boost Carpenter, later on, and really say, no, his movies were not forgettable at all. They were very important genre films, and They Live is very much in that category. Really one of those essential watches of the 1980s. If for nothing else, to get the vibe of the late Reagan era and how the state of things, and that's one of the big reasons I would make for this movie. I mean, you could but those are themes that Carpenter's done in previous films as well. You know, Escape from New York, definitely, and there's always that sense of things kind of falling apart that you get in his films. So yeah, and always like kind of a working class sensibility. Carpenter brings to his movies as well. The first film he did, Dark Star, which is also very much working class sci-fi and kind of like a precursor to Alien. So they live really kind of maintains that tradition of things going. The score kind of has a bluesy score. I guess at this point Carpenter was kind of moving away from the synth and doing more kind of like these electric guitar blues riffs throughout the film. It's a quotable movie. There's a lot of good lines, and it's 90 minutes too, so it's a quick watch. So yeah, really one of those important sci-fi movies to come out at the end of the 80s. Unique for its casting, and I think you just a really unconventional approach that Carpenter took. So yeah, those are my thoughts on They Live. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye.